Welcome to Leaving Nothing to Chance, your go-to podcast where we bring you insights from some of the most influential voices in small business and personal development. Each week, we dive deep into conversations with top thought leaders, authors, and business moguls from around the world, sharing their secrets to success and strategies for growth. Tune in for exclusive content that will inspire, motivate, and equip you to take your journey to the next level. This is Leaving Nothing to Chance.
Hey, I really appreciate you being here, Mr. Sam Penny, all the way down from the Gold Coast in Australia, where it's going on 5 a.m., correct?
Yes, it is. And I'm actually on the Sunshine Coast, which is about 2 hours north of the Gold Coast, and it's 10 times better.
So you're up by Brisbane.
Yes, about an hour north of Brisbane. Gold Coast is an hour south of Brisbane.
Got it. You know what I didn't tell you the last time we talked was I spent a month in Brisbane, but we were out like away from the city where I was staying at these people's home. And I would hear the koalas during mating season. And for my North American friends, you have no idea what that sounds like, but it sounds like somebody's getting murdered. But yeah, they're very loving creatures, needless to say.
Yes. It could have been the drop bears, though.
The what?
The drop bears. They look like a koala, but those things are vicious. They'll kill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They're cute little animals, but I know they all have a rough side to them. So,
yeah.
Sam, you've got a multitude of careers that you've had, but let's just start with from icy oceans to boardroom, because I know you've done something very unique in your swimming career. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, I've done a few things. Yeah, look, I've swum the English Channel. That was 2018, and that was a great experience because the reason I really reveled in it was I went from being a pool sprinter where 50 meters, 100 meters is my specialty, to thinking I love the idea of swimming the English Channel, from swimming from one country to another. How can I turn from 50-meter specialist where your race is over in about, 26, 27 seconds to swimming 34 kilometers? And the whole journey was such an amazing time. The people that I met along the way, but also in myself, recognizing that setting that huge challenge and changing your body to adapt to getting out and swimming for 10 hours, 12 hours at a time was just outstanding. And then from there, because I found that kind of, a little bit easy, John. And so I thought, I'm gonna sign up and do a double crossing, England, France, and back again, 68 kilometers, so about 42 miles. And whilst I was on that journey, I'm always the kind of person, I guess I'm creative in my thinking, and I came across this concept, which nobody had ever attempted before, was to swim the English Channel in winter. And yeah, I set about going out to swim the English Channel in winter in December. It was December 4th. And along that journey, there are other things that I had to do to really prepare myself mentally and physically. One of the things was what's called an ice mile. So an ice mile is where you swim, obviously, a mile, but in water that is under 5 degrees. Let's see, when I swam it was 3.9 degrees in the water in just a pair of Speedos, a swimming cap and goggles. It's the same temperature. This is the only way I can make people understand how bloody cold it was. You know, when you're at a barbecue and there's an esky and there's one beer left in the bottom and the thing's full of ice and water, and you plunge your hand down to root around to try and find that last beer, and your hand freezes and it goes numb and it aches. That's how cold 3.9 degrees is Celsius. It's pretty damn cold. Yeah, so I got that under my belt. That was a really scary experience because it was so hard, and there were a couple of times where I really worried about my own safety. And then, yeah, English Channel attempt in winter. Nobody on the planet had ever tried it, and it was absolutely fascinating, my experience, because the water was 10 degrees Celsius. The air temp was 6 degrees. So it's bloody cold. And again, still in just a pair of Speedos, swimming cap and goggles. And It was 4 a.m. I remember standing on the shore of England, looking out into the dark of the English Channel. And just how calm I was. I didn't feel the cold of the air. I didn't feel the cold of the water, but I knew that next step nobody on the planet had ever taken. And just this feeling of pure calmness because there was no precedence. There was no one to compare to. And it was, wow, like it's such a privilege to be able to do something that out of what, 8 billion people on this planet that nobody had ever done. It
Wow.
was, yeah, pure joy.
Amazing, amazing. Have you entered any of the International Ice Swimming Federation stuff? I know that's growing every year, and over here, and even in the States, they're starting to have the odd meet. Have you done that in any of those competitions?
No, I haven't because living here in Australia, we really do lack a lot of cold weather. I had to go up into what's called our snowy mountains. We've got some little ski slopes up there. I found a lake, and it's very hard for an Australian to try and find cold water. But also, I hate cold water. I hate it's even though I've done so much cold stuff, I really don't enjoy it. Whereas those people who do all the ice mile racing, they love that stuff. They love the cold. Yeah, I just go, you guys are mad.
It's funny. I've heard Wim Hof say the same thing. He's like, I don't like cold water. I just know the benefits, but I hate the cold water. I'd rather be taking a warm shower. So, anyway, I'm not as nutty as either one of you guys when it comes to it, but I do my 3 minutes every single day, 12 months a year. I've got an ice freezer here for the warm months. And then as our weather transitions here the next couple of weeks, I can just use my pool. So I do my 3 minutes a day minimum of cold. And I believe there's a lot of benefit to it. Not everybody shares that opinion, certainly in the medical world, but I like
Yeah. Yeah, look, I converted a chest freezer into basically an ice bath. And as part of my training for my ice mile and also my winter channel attempt, I had it set at 1 degree and I'd go and sit in that for about 25, 30 minutes every time. And I'd do that every second day. Every second day I put myself into hypothermia. But it was all about teaching my body and my mind to adapt to those cold situations. And also not to be afraid of the next hour of just violent shivering.
So let me ask you this. So you walk into a boardroom and they don't know you. They've read your resume, they've read a little bit about you, and they say, okay, we got this guy coming in. He swam the English Channel in December. He's done all of these things that most human beings wouldn't even attempt. And now he's coming in to help us give guidance or influence or strategy and tactics to take our business to the next level. How do you get from all of the questions about the things you've done to the real meat and potatoes of, okay, guys, listen, these are some of the changes that you need to make, which are going to be uncomfortable because everything you just described there to most human beings is extremely uncomfortable. They wouldn't even attempt it, right? There's a few crazy people that would, right? But at the end of the day, business is the same, right? Where sometimes we have to do the uncomfortable because we're not achieving what we want to achieve, or better yet, we want to become a Nvidia. We want to become a Microsoft. We want to become a Ford Motor Company 60 years ago, et cetera. We want to become that elite company that stands out different than all its competitors. What kind of advice do you give them based not only on your athletic journey and on your overcoming journey, but how do you give them that strategy so that they hear you and they segue away from all the things that you've done into here's why we should follow what this guy's saying?
Yeah, look, I always like to relate things back to a Venn diagram of my experiences and then also the experiences and the skills and capabilities of an organization. So to give you an example of the Venn diagram of my English Channel winter attempt, in a past life, I was a civil engineer. So that means I'm great at numbers, great at data. And one of the reasons why I came up with this idea of the English Channel winter attempt was I actually found the daily water data for the previous 11 years. And so I had forecast that the water temp on the 4th of December was going to be about 12.5 degrees. But also, I knew that I had the fitness and the ability to swim the English Channel because I had previously done that. And the third part was that I was good in cold water. So that Venn diagram really came together to really show that this was something that was possible. And even though in that attempt I got 10 kilometers, so about a third of the way across the English Channel, I had forecast the water was going to be 12.5 degrees, but I landed on the 1st of December in the middle of an English cold snap. So the water when I landed was 12.5 degrees. When I swam, it had dropped down to 10. And there's some things that you can control, but there's a lot of things outside your control, like the weather, like nature, which really can destroy your plans. But those things are not things that you should really be disappointed if you don't achieve your goal. It's, as the saying goes, John, control the controllables. And the other thing as well is being able to really block out a lot of the distractions. When you know what your goal is, if you know what the path is and your journey is, being able to be laser focused, being able to put the blinkers on and focus on where you want to go, where you want to lead, means that it's easier to say no to a lot of the things. Shiny tools, new product ideas. What if we went and did marketing over here? When you know where you're going, it makes it so easy to be able to say no. And that's one of the hardest things for everybody, to be able to say no to things. So many people could be people pleasers and they say yes to everything. But also I've had my own companies for about 25 years and I've had some great successes in the past. And it also comes down to doing something that's very different to what everybody else is doing. So, for example, I had a medical device company, and this medical device is now pretty big in the US. I sold that company back in, 2011, I think it was. And this particular product that I created was twice as expensive as anything that had been in pharmacies before. It was a technology that had never been in pharmacies before. And it was being promoted by a company that had no experience in pharmacies before. But I recognized that for us to stand out in the marketplace, you need to do something different to what everybody else is doing. So I intentionally didn't have a sales team. My marketing strategy was old school. It was TV, the show Bold and the Beautiful. Yeah, that played at 4:30 every afternoon here in Australia on Channel 10. And I owned that program right across the whole country because that was where my market was. But everybody else who was in the marketing space, think of Panadol and all the big drug companies, nobody was in that space. Nobody was focusing on what is the true emotion that we're trying to draw out of somebody. Because a brand effectively is a smile in the mind. And when you really understand that business is, at the end of the day, all about emotion, you can really then drive forward. But you have to do it differently to what everybody else is doing. So, John, there's a couple of main things here. Understanding what your Venn diagram is. So what are your capabilities and how can they give you that competitive advantage that where all of your skills and all of your experiences can come together to give you something that nobody can replicate. Being able to be creative and do things that are very different to what the rest of the market is doing. And the third part is really being laser focused, really understanding exactly what you're trying to achieve and feeling confident in saying no to all the distractions that are out there.
One of the things that you're quoted on quite a bit is say yes to the impossible.
Yes.
Go further on that.
Yeah, look, I've got a podcast called Why Do You Think You Could Do That? Here's the one liner for the show, John. Ordinary people doing batshit crazy stuff and saying yes to the impossible. And with all of these people, so for example, a guy called Eden Aruch, who was the first person to circumnavigate the planet only using human power. Another guest, Lockie Smart, was the youngest person to circumnavigate the planet solo in a plane. All these people Everybody started off as an ordinary person. But along the way, there was this spark that really got them, that really lighted their passion. Really, it's the thing that got them up out of bed every single morning. And everybody around them, that's batshit crazy. That's impossible. You couldn't do that. And for all of these people, and trying to swim the English Channel in winter, there's a lot of people saying, that's impossible, you're stupid, don't do it. But when everybody's saying that's impossible, there's only one way to find out if it is impossible, and that's by saying yes. And that's why you need to say yes to the impossible. And if we bring that back to business, we need to go out and find those big North Stars where we can really hone in, where everybody in the marketplace thinks it's impossible. But even if you're aiming for the moon, you miss, you hit the stars, as the saying goes. If you go after something that's so bloody ridiculously big and you miss, you're 10 times further than if you sat back and did what everybody else was doing.
There was a great quote that John Kennedy had, and it's funny because I named one of my companies after this, and he used this term questra. And what it meant was shooting for the moon, the stars, and the sun. And he said exactly more or less what you just said. He said, we're gonna shoot for the moon, but the stars and the sun are out there, who knows? And within less than a couple of years, unfortunately, he didn't live to see it. Obviously, we landed on the moon and so on and so forth. So those big thinkers, we need them in this world. Who right now would be, and it could be a couple of people in the business community, who do you look at? Who do you look at as that guy or those guys or women for that matter that have that type of enlightenment, if you will, where they're saying, we're going to do this project or that project that the rest of the world says, oh man, you can't do that. Forget it. Crazy. Keep your money. Fold your money in half, put it back in your wallet. Who are those people and why?
Look, I think it's really difficult to go past someone like Elon Musk. What he's done with Tesla, what he's doing with SpaceX, what he's doing with the Boring Company. The Boring Company, for example, one of his lesser known companies where he's basically tunneling to create public transport. He looked at the problem and just going, everyone said tunneling is too expensive. It was costing $1 billion a mile or something like that. It was probably way more than that. Okay, the reason it's so expensive is because we have to build bloody big tunnels to take a bus, for example. Okay, what if we not looked at how can we take a bus? How can we take a vessel that effectively is like in a pressurized tube? And he was able to, with just a simple change of thinking, 10x the price reduction of what it costs to tunnel. And so many things that went into that. It was looking at the vessel, pressurizing the tunnel. How can we, with our equipment, how can we do it cheaper? And if you also look at SpaceX, he started off with Russian rockets, which I think his first one he bought for about $22 million. Meanwhile, NASA is spending billions of dollars on every single launch that they were doing. And then here comes this guy along, he's going, I can achieve the exact same thing with a $22 million rocket. And it's not Elon Musk doing it by himself. He has an entire team of people who are more capable than him in a lot of areas going through this and taking this out. But he's such that visionary where he provides that North Star, and obviously based on a lot of data and a lot of creative thinking. But it's always important to have the right people in the right seats. And that's something that Elon Musk is bloody brilliant at. How can he, regardless of what he did with his Doge operation in the White House, but here's a guy who stepped out of all of his companies that are some of the largest in the world for about 6 months and still keep them running, is because he has an absolutely remarkable team there running it day to day.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Okay. Because, like, for example, one of the authors that I'm a big fan of, Jim Collins, wrote Good to Great, Built to Last. And you just referenced it. and Elon is a prime example of it. I think Jeff Bezos is too, and there's certainly others that have the right fannies and the right seats on the bus, the right accounting department, the right legal department, the right logistics, the right everything, where they've hired that right individual. They don't hire their drinking buddies or their golf buddies. They hire the right people, as opposed to companies that you and I have both seen where they hire a friend. If that friend's got the resume, terrific. But if that friend's just a friend, it's the wrong person. And sometimes in business, that's a hard delineation to make. But how do you help when you go in and you help executive teams? How do you help them to see, hey, you got to put the right seat, the right button, the right seat on the bus, or you're going to have a problem? And look at Elon and look at the other people who are doing so.
Yeah, look, it all comes back to understanding where you're going. And a lot of companies, oh, this is what we do. Well, quite often, 9 times out of 10, they don't understand what they're truly doing. What is their why? What is the purpose of the company? But also then understanding what are your core values? Because before you try to get the right people in the right seats on the bus, you need firstly the driver. And the driver, the CEO, the founder, the visionary is the person who's going to take us in the right direction. But getting the right people in the right seats on the bus comes back to what are the core values of our organization? What is it that really is going to drive us forward and help us make decisions faster without everybody having to come in and make those decisions? And so we can have an amazing team, but if all those people aren't aligned and living those core values day to day, we're going to have internal conflicts quite often. We're going to have customers that really aren't loyal to the brand. We're going to have employees and suppliers that aren't loyal to the brand if they're not aligned to what those core values are. So it's easy to go in and just go, yep, you need to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. But if we don't know where we're going, if we don't know why we're trying to go there, and if we have people who don't believe in what we actually stand for as an organization, then we're missing the point. And so there's a lot of work that has to go in prior to being able to create this dream team that the Bezoses of the world and the Musks of the world are able to do. So there's so much effort that has to happen prior. And then once we understand those things, the purpose, the why, what do we stand for? What are our values? And then it could be a matter of we actually do have pretty much the right people, but they're sitting in the wrong seats. And so someone who might be head of marketing, for example, might be better in strategy or new product development, those kinds of things. And obviously, John, it's a lot more expensive to try and replace seats. But if we can shuffle people around in those seats, then yeah, firstly, we're going to save a lot of money.
So let's talk a little bit about how business has changed, because you've been in business a long time. How are you using AI, and how do you see it going forward, changing the complexity of business and the speed of business?
Yes. Look, I see AI as having two sides to it. One is that it breeds laziness. So it's so easy for the CEO, for people on the team, for marketers to reach to, for example, ChatGPT and hit that deep research button and just go, give me my marketing strategy. What are my core values? But it really lacks the humanity that is what people are. And then you've got the organizations who recognize that we're built on a foundation of values which have real particular humanity to them. And when we're in a position where we can bring in humanity to for example, our marketing, the way that we deal with customers, the way that we deal with suppliers and employees, we then start to create something that has the potential of being long living. I see it way too often, John, where AI is breeding so much laziness. And look, it's great for creating an email or creating a letter, those kinds of things, but it just is not able to bring in what the human essence is of humanity, of empathy. And those are the things that customers crave for. They're the things that suppliers and also employees crave, is that human element to it. And the great companies moving forward are going to be the ones that use AI purely for productivity, yet still have the humanity and the empathy built into their DNA, where you can sit down with the group. Let's say, for example, it's the sales team. Rather than what's our strategy, let's chat GPT this, because that's pretty much what every sales team around the world is doing right now. How can we build human empathy and humanize what we're doing into it? Because that's what's really going to make companies stand out in this AI future. Yeah, everybody, and I see it with marketers right across the world at the moment, all leaning into digital marketing and using ChatGPT to come up with their captions, to come up with whatever the prompts are. And it is always lacking something. But if we go out and have conversations, if we go out and attend those conferences, if we go out and create live events where we still foster this human interaction, where we can learn from our customers, we can learn from our employees and learn from our suppliers, we're going to be creating a company that's able to accelerate faster than the ones that are doing what everybody else is doing. We always need to stand apart from the masses. A saying that I love: if you ain't the lead dog, the scenery never changes. Just imagine if you're pulling a sled, you're that lead dog. Everything that you see is always going to be looking fresh. There's no tracks there. But if you're that second dog in the line, all you're going to be doing is looking at that dog's asshole.
And nobody wants to do that.
Hell no.
Unless you're a veterinarian, maybe. But anyway, hey, let's talk about podcasts, okay? Because like myself, you're a podcaster. You've interviewed a lot of great people. You got 2 podcasts, right? Why do you think you could do that? Which you referenced earlier, which is other crazy people who think they can do crazy things and do them, and prove that they're not crazy, by the way, by doing them. And then, of course, built to sell and built to buy. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you've learned, because I know I've learned so much just you and I talking. I know you and I've learned a couple little things from each other, not only just about each other, but how people think. And I know I've learned a tremendous amount just interviewing so many people, and I'm sure you have too. But there was 3 in particular that I heard on your show that I want to ask you about and what you learned from them. One is Aaron, I hope you said his last name right, Aaron Linsdow.
Yes.
82 days at the South Pole. Quite a story. What did you learn from Aaron? What's your takeaway that you can apply with your family, with your business, with your life?
Yeah, good question. One of the things I love about the podcast, Why Do You Think You Could Do That, is that I get to interview these people who've gone out and done amazing things. And effectively, for me, it's like a great research paper. I'm collecting all this data, and as I build up my bank of interviews and the transcripts that go from them, I'm starting to really understand what are the common threads of all these people. And if we look at Aaron Linsdow, one of his greatest skills, I would say, is patience and not rushing the process. So his spark came from hearing someone giving a presentation about the South Pole. And then how can that just sounds absolutely amazing. That sounds bonkers, but I'd love to do that. I wonder if I could ski to the South Pole. And that spark stayed with him. And it wasn't until 10 years later that he actually set out on that adventure. And that's a really common thread across all of my guests on the show, is that They don't rush it. And in a world where our attention spans are so short now, where we're doom scrolling on TikTok, on Instagram, and you see it in YouTube, where we're all looking for 15-second videos because that's all our mind can take now. But all of my guests are able to look at the long game, 5 years, 10 years. What do I need to do in this year, this month, this week, today? What do I need to do today to move towards my big goal in 10 years' time? And even when Aaron set out on his amazing journey to go from the Antarctic coast to the South Pole, it took him 82 days. And look, there's been other people that have been on the ice and skied to the South Pole, but nobody has taken 82 days. And when he started off, his first 3 days, he was only making about a mile a day. And it's a 600-mile trek. Because on the coast, the snow is extremely deep. So he'd get 20 yards, have to go back and dig out his two sleds. And his two sleds were 160 kilos. What that is in pounds, I don't know. It's a few hundred pounds.
About 350.
350 pounds. So he'd have to go back and physically dig his sleds out and then go forward another 20 meters. And knowing that he still had 599 miles to go, but he never once was worried about his progress because he knew that he was still going in the right direction. He knew that these first few steps were going to be the hardest. And when you look at when you're trying to start something new, whether it's a new business, whether it's just trying to get fit, the first part is always the bloody hardest. You're excited at the start, but then quickly reality sets in and you just go, holy shit, this is hard. Maybe this isn't for me. But like Aaron, when you're focused on where do you want to go? I want to go to the South Pole. But I know that this first part is going to be bloody hard. Then you'll have that capability in the mindset to just accept that this is going to be hard. And so what he was doing was, all I need to do is the next 20 meters. Go back, dig my sleds out, get the next 20 meters. And that's what he kept doing. And halfway through his trek, so for his food, because remember, he has to carry absolutely everything, all of his food, his tent, a couple of gas stoves, those kinds of things, so that he could melt ice for water. Halfway through, his main calorie source was butter. So he carried 35 kilograms of butter with him. But halfway through, his butter went off. And the reason was because the solar effect in Antarctica meant that even though he had it stored in his bags, the solar effect made all of his butter go rancid. So he lost half of his calories. So instead of consuming 5,000 calories a day, he dropped down to something like 18 calories a day. Meanwhile, he's burning a huge amount of energy whilst he's out there. And in Aaron Linstow style, you just go, that's a bit of a problem. How do I accept that? And that's what he did. He accepted that he was effectively then starting to dive into the fat stores of his body and just go, yep, I recognize that this is a problem, but there is nothing I can do to counteract it. I just need to accept that this is one of the things that has happened. Control the controllables. That was something outside of his control. But what he could control was still moving forward every day. He could also control rationing the rest of his food. And when he still had about 40 days to go, he was able to just, I know where I'm going, I know what I can control, and I'm just going to keep moving forward. And when you bring that back into your context of, for example, if you're trying to get fit, if you're trying to lose weight, you get to a point where things plateau. You're losing weight and then all of a sudden you don't lose weight for a couple of weeks. Or you get a bit of an injury, a bit of a niggle. When we accept when we accept these things that are happening, can I control that injury? Not really, but I can change what I'm doing to adapt, but I still need to keep driving towards what my goal is. Then we're in a great position to, if we don't hit the moon, we're always going to hit the stars. And Aaron Linstow, I think that was one of the great messages for me that came out of it. But also, once he got to the South Pole, I asked him, what did it feel like? Apart from joy, it was a bit of sadness as well, John, because he reached this amazing goal that he had been preparing 10 years for, and then it was over. And he hadn't lined something up after. And we see that so many times. I want to lose 10 kilos. I want to go and run a marathon, or I want to dominate this market. You get there and you just go, I did it. Now what do I do? And so many times, and I see it actually with all of my guests, is that if they haven't got something lined up after that, they fall into a state of sadness. Some of them go into a state of depression because so much of their life have been based around what this massive task was. But I've got another saying that I really love, which is, when you get to the top of your mountain, find a bigger mountain. And so if you go and lose your 10 kilos, fantastic, celebrate it. But you need to have something else lined up, because look at what you've just achieved. Look at what you just put your body through or your mind through. You now know that you have this personal strength to be able to commit to a task and stick to it and make shit happen. Now let's harness that energy and find something else which is going to be your new North Star, and let's get out there and go for it. And yeah, Aaron Linstow's story just had so many elements to it that I've listened back to it about 3 times, because yeah, just the power of what he has achieved, but also the story of what life was like then after.
What you're saying is so true. And I forget the famous psychiatrist that I heard speak on that with NASA astronauts. Same thing. It's like these guys go to the moon, right? And they've always been elite. They've all generally been elite students, elite athletes, elite everything. They get into the space program, they go to the moon, they come back, their wife says, take the garbage out. And the guy goes, yeah, but last week I was up there. She goes, yeah, we'll take the garbage out anyway. Okay, fine and dandy, humbling moment. But if they don't find the next thing, a lot of them fell into alcoholism and other things where they had to refocus them. And I'm forgetting the fellow's name. I actually met him, but you're making a great point. Is like, we always in life, especially if we're an achiever, and most of our listeners to my show, your show, are achievement oriented people, be they in business or athletics or in other endeavors. You always have to have that next thing, you know? So let me ask you about another guy, though, because I found this guy's story interesting too. Mark Grew, he was a kayaker in the Northwest Passage. These are some really interesting people you've interviewed, but same thing. What were the common threads that you found between Mark and Aaron, for example?
Yeah, so Mark Agnew, he's a really interesting guy. So his father was a famous explorer. He mapped Patagonia, he climbed Everest, and this is before people were climbing Everest. He was back in, I think it was the 60s, he was climbing Everest. And so he came from this real adventurer pedigree, but it wasn't instilled in his DNA that he was going to be an adventurer. Yeah, he knew that his father had climbed Everest, and everybody, when he go to school, for example, yeah, my dad's climbed Everest, but to him it was no biggie. The interesting thing about Mark is that he got to a point in his early 20s where he just goes, I just want more out of life. I want to go and try something. I want to see what I'm mentally and physically capable of. And so he signed up to row across the Atlantic. And his first attempt of rowing across the Atlantic with a group lasted all of about 48 hours. And he's going, wow, that sucked. They had issues with their equipment. So he then teamed up with a Canadian lady to go and do it again. And they lasted about 72 hours on the second attempt. Once again, equipment of failure. And those two failures really put him into a state of depression, because it was, for him, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I can't do this. And coming back to control the controllables, something like your equipment, you can control that. And they had overlooked a couple of crucial things in their equipment setup, which, if they had gone out and had more experience and spoken to more people, never would have happened. But recognizing then that Mark, and this was, I guess, part of Mark's Venn diagram, he realized that I'm really fit. I love where my body is, but I feel really sad about what has happened in these two failures. And one of the things with Mark is that he's not a solo adventurer. He loves the camaraderie of being part of a team. And so every adventure that he's done has always been part of a team. And he came up with this idea of, can we kayak the Northwest Passage? And at that stage, nobody had ever done it before. And so he found three others, just going, okay, let's go and kayak the Northwest Passage. And he had applied so much pressure to himself that he just had to get it done. He was in agony every single day. I think it was 60 days of kayaking that they did. They ran out of food. There's a common thread, people just running out of food. But being able to push forward, and for some people, it's the solo challenge. For Mark, it's that group challenge where you've got the camaraderie, where you're having a down moment, but you've got others in the group who can lift you up, and vice versa. And with Mark, it was a really remarkable story of accepting failure of your past, going out to then achieve something to prove to yourself. And one of the things that with his previous two failures is that they were quite public. And because of who his father was as a famous explorer, the failures that he had and the depression that he went into was because he cared about what others were thinking. But he was able to work with some psychologists who said, this is your life. This is your path. You're the one who's responsible for what you achieve. And when he recognized that, to be honest, I really need to stop caring about what others think about me. This is what I want to go out and achieve. This is what I'm going to achieve. Let me just go and do it. And if I fail, what will I learn from that? And obviously in his Northwest Passage kayaking attempt, he was successful. A huge amount of challenges. He had a polar bear scratching at his tent. They tried to scare it off with flare guns and throwing rocks at it and yelling at it. And the thing hung around for 15 minutes.
Wow.
But it's one of those things that when you go out and with my guests, they're going out and doing such amazing adventures. And yeah, sure, the first person to kayak the Northwest Passage, the first person to sail solo around Antarctica or fly solo around the world. We each have our own adventures within us. And we don't need to go out and do world first. But I think it was Mark who actually said, what we're actually doing is creating stories for our grandkids. And John, just imagine when we're 70 years old, 80 years old, and we're sitting down and telling stories to the grandkids. They're 5 years old or 10 years old. Go, hey, Pop, tell me that story again. And those are those beautiful moments that you can then relive. But if we sat in the same job for the next 30 years, we're missing what life is all about.
It's funny because probably my favorite US president of all time was Theodore Roosevelt. And he would have fit in on your show so well, because if you study his life, it was all about that, the adventures, right? He went out, he was a New Yorker from New York City. He goes out, he lives in South Dakota. at a time where South Dakota today is pretty rural. Back then, it was buffalo and horses and et cetera, and live off the land. So I'm listening to some of the adventures last night on your show, and I'm going, wow. I just have such great respect for people who do those type of things. I'm not that creative. I don't come up with anything that creative to do, but I love listening to other people's stories. And let me just ask you about one other guy, because I made a list of them. Let me ask you about John Williamson, because he's got an interesting story as well.
Yeah, so certainly John isn't the person who's gone out and done world first. He's not that great adventurer. However, something really resonated with him, that he was building this company called Construct Health. It's a physiotherapy company, and it just blew up. It was just going so fast. And twice he faced bankruptcy. And rather than going into bankruptcy here in Australia, if you go into bankruptcy, it is really you're black banned pretty much from running a company for the next 5 years. And to give you an example of the panic that set in one time, he hopped off a plane in Brisbane and he's walking across the tarmac and looked at his banking app. And he goes, I don't know why I looked at my banking app, but I'm walking across the tarmac back to the terminal and it showed that it was $8,000 in the red. And $8,000 to a lot of people doesn't sound that much. But he had payroll in 2 days' time of about $65,000. And one of the greatest things for him is his team, are his employees, and just this sense of panic that hit him. And for the next 5 hours, he was just panic stricken. That type of the paralysis that we get where something has turned really bad and we just feel that there is nothing we can do. And I think it was very important for John to go through this moment of panic of just, I cannot do anything. I am paralyzed by the fear. But then after having this moment of paralysis, being able to just go, okay, that's what the situation is. How the hell am I going to dig myself out of this hole? And he started to do that. And he then, in a few months later, had a similar situation where a contract was pulled. He was doing a lot of work with Australian mining companies to work with the employees and providing physiotherapy services. And he had a big contract that was pulled where he faced bankruptcy again. And at this second moment, he actually had a mentor who was, he used to be a very senior person in the White House. And he called this guy up and he said, look, I don't know what I can do. I'm at my absolute rock bottom. There is no further I can fall. And this guy, the only thing that he said was, John, you can take more load than that. And it's so true. When we think that we are at our rock bottom, where there is nothing more we can do, there is nothing more that we can give, we actually have a lot more. And we've probably got at least another 20% left to give. And surrounding yourself with the right people who can say the right things at the right time, you might think that your world is just about to end. But the right words at the right time can give you that ability to really go up, to really drive forward. And you referenced Teddy Roosevelt just before. One of my greatest pieces of prose is actually by him, The Man in the Arena. And the thing about The Man in the Arena is we cop criticism. You and I, John, being the people who are really always driving forward, driving hard, and like a lot of your listeners, we have a lot of people criticizing us. But the types of people who criticize you are the people who have never stepped in your shoes, who have never forged forward or tried to row the Atlantic or tried to build a business that defies belief. But it's those critics who have never stepped in the arena, who have never fought the battles that we have fought, who have never wiped the sweat, the blood, and the tears off their faces, his words, Teddy Roosevelt's words in The Man in the Arena, and I think everybody should read it and learn it, because what it allows us to do is to really block out that unnecessary noise of the critics. It gives us the right to say no. It gives us the right to say, go away. And in John's case, he had pressure from absolutely everybody. But this White House mentor that he had been in the arena. He'd worked one-on-one with a couple of presidents and the upper echelons of the White House. This guy was super senior. He was, I think, the scheduling officer or something like that. And he had seen presidents and others around him at their rock bottom, but knowing that they still could take more load. And that was where John found so much strength, but also them being able to block out the noise of people saying, you're going under, you're stupid, you haven't done it, you don't know what you're doing, all those kinds of things. The man in the arena, John.
We've all been where that John has been too, certainly, and where President Roosevelt was. And people forget too, he gets shot. People forget this story. He's one of our presidents that was almost assassinated. He gets shot. He's got his speech in his breast pocket. And he looks down, he says to the doctor, is it in my heart? The doctor says, no. He goes, let me go make the speech. We'll go to the hospital after. And he gets in the car and he literally goes and he makes his speech to 10,000 people. And then he goes to the hospital. Just old school and tough beyond tough. Hey, Sam, tell everybody a little bit. We referenced the shows, but I want everybody to know where they can find you, find the shows, find your information, and maybe how you can help them with their business, because I know you do a lot of helping along the way, consulting, all that sort of thing as well. Tell everybody where they can find you and also where they can find these two great shows, because they are enjoyable, by the way. I really enjoy listening to these guys that you're interviewing. All fascinating people.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, John. Firstly, my website is sampenny.com. That's where you'll find both of the shows. Why do you think you could do that? And also Built to Sell, Built to Buy. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Sam Penny. Pretty easy to find on there. All my socials are at 90 Days with Sam. Yeah, and from there, reach out, whether it's one-on-one or working with an organization. I really want people to achieve more with what they're doing with their life, but also an organization to really hone in on what they're truly doing. What is the legacy that they want to leave behind in their organization? And not focusing on the strategic marketing, for example, for the next 2 months, 3 months. What's our plan for the next year? We need to be looking well beyond that, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time, to give everybody in the organization, the whole team, the employees, the suppliers, but also the customers, that guiding light of this is why we should back this organization. Yeah, so hit me up, LinkedIn, and also my website, sampenny.com.
It's been a privilege, Sam. We need to do this every few months, by the way, and get together like this. And it's been a privilege, my friend. I appreciate you getting up so early, too. But I know you're up early to train anyway, but just to talk to me, I appreciate it, bud.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check back weekly for more exciting episodes. And don't miss Ink and Insight every Wednesday, where we celebrate iconic authors and dive into their impactful works.